to Zoo School Live. I'm Elisssssa, and I have a very special friend to show you guys today, and his name is Holmes. And Holmes is one of our education ambassador kingsnakes. So more specifically, Holmes is called an Arizona kingsnake or a desert kingsnake. And these guys are found in the brushlands and scrublands and deserts of Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico. These guys are called kingsnakes for a very specific reason. So they are known for eating other snakes. More specifically, they're known for eating venomous snakes. So these guys actually have a built-up resistance to some snake venom. So that means that they're not as easily affected by that venom as we would be if we were to get bitten by a rattlesnake, for example. So these guys are known for eating venomous snakes such as rattlesnakes, copperheads, and coral snakes. They eat other things as well, like eggs and birds and other small mammals, other rodents like mice and voles and moles and things like that. But they are known for specializing in eating venomous snakes. There's also a larger group of kingsnakes. So in that big group of kingsnakes, you'll find a very well-known kingsnake, the king cobra, which are also known for eating snakes. In Pennsylvania, we have a king snake that is pretty common, and that king snake is a milk snake. So milk snakes are found in Pennsylvania, and they're also known for eating other snakes as well. In the wild, king snakes, Arizona king snakes or desert king snakes more specifically, can live to be about 5 to 9 years old. But in human care, so at the zoo, they can live past their 30s. So Holmes was born in 2004, so he's 16 years old this year. We're not sure his exact birth date, but we're hoping he has another good 15 plus years to go. I'm gonna put him in this dig box that we've seen before. We're gonna watch him kind of squirm around and navigate a new environment while we keep talking about Holmes, okay? So what I'm putting him in is something called EcoFlake, which is a type of substrate that he is accustomed to that is used in his enclosure, as well as some dirt and mulch and rocks. He is known for digging tunnels in this EcoFlake, so maybe we'll be able to see him dig some tunnels and navigate through this new environment. He is, good job, bud. He is a little bit territorially aggressive. So what that means is that he's protective of his house. He doesn't really want anybody going in his house. So we just have to take some, extra caution before taking him out of his enclosure. In the wild, these guys are also known for being a bit of a rather more aggressive species. So these guys breed in the springtime. They can lay around 10 eggs in a clutch. Holmes is a boy snake, so he won't have any babies, but the females will lay about 10 eggs in a clutch. Looks like he's sniffing all around. And he weighs about 2 pounds, and he's about 5 feet in length. So he's a pretty big snake. Not as big or as long as black rat snakes, which in Pennsylvania are the longest snakes. They can get over 7 feet in length, but he's pretty close. He's one of our longer snakes. Some predators of these guys are alligators, hawks, raccoons, and opossums. And if there's any other bigger snakes around, they wouldn't mind having him as a snack as well. He has this beautiful coloration and the dark scales with that yellow. These guys are a little bit interesting with what time they're active during the day. So they're kind of active more in the daytime, in the spring and fall, when it's not super, super hot. But in the summertime, they are more nocturnal, so they're going to be more active at nighttime because they're trying to avoid the excessive heat, because he is a species of snake native to southwestern United States, where it's very, very hot and very, very dry. And those black scales are also going to conduct heat a lot more quickly than a lighter colored snake. So he is going to be a little bit less active in the daytime in the summer when it's really, really hot. So we've talked a lot about snakes before, about what they eat and how they smell. So we're gonna focus a little bit more today about common snake myths. So, you know, the first very, very common myth that we have mentioned before is that snakes are slimy. We know that that is not the case. The only animal that we brought out that is actually, I would consider slimy would be our African bullfrogs when we met Alpha. He's a slimy dude. Holmes here, not slimy, he's very, very smooth. So if you guys at home want to touch your nails, hopefully your nails are not slimy. I really hope that they're smooth. And then if you go ahead and touch your hair at home, it should also be smooth and hopefully not slimy unless there's lots of gel in it. Our nails, our hair, and Holmes's scales are all made out of the same thing. They're all made out of something called keratin, which is a really strong protein that helps to protect our body, also helps to protect his body. So that's probably the most common myth about snakes, is that they are slimy. That is not the case at all. They feel just like your fingernails, if not smoother. Another common myth is the difference between poison and venom. So poison has to be, you have to eat something that is poisonous, or you have to touch something that's poisonous. So some common examples would be if you were to rub up against poison ivy, poison oak, poison sumac. If you're allergic, you might have a skin reaction, you might break out into hives. Or if you were to eat something that's poisonous. So if other animals, maybe in the Amazon, ate a poison dart frog, they could get sick because they're eating something that is poisonous. So you have to touch it or eat it. If I were to touch a venomous snake, if I were to touch a rattlesnake, I'm not going to get sick. There's no poison on the scales of that snake. So snakes are venomous, whereas, you know, poison dart frogs are poisonous. Other animals that could inject venom are things like scorpions and spiders. So venom has to be injected into your body. There is one notable exception that I know about, and there's still research that's ongoing to see if there's any others, but there is a snake that is called the tiger keelback. And the tiger keelback stores toxin in glands on its neck, and therefore it is poisonous, because if you were to touch those glands, it could make you sick. But for the most part, snakes can be venomous. Now, again, Holmes is not venomous. The easiest way to tell that Holmes is not venomous, easiest way, I was holding him. I would never, ever, ever, ever be holding a venomous snake. So, easy way to tell venomous versus poisonous, and to tell whether or not Holmes is venomous, is that I wasn't holding him. There's a couple of ways to tell if snakes in Pennsylvania are venomous. It's only true for those in Pennsylvania though, and you know what, to be honest, if you come across a snake in the wild, you probably don't want to get too close to try and figure out whether or not it's venomous. Best to just leave them be. Another myth is that snakes are all tail. So I'm gonna pick Holmes up again just to show you. A lot of people think that the majority of snakes is just their tail. So if we look and find Holmes's cloaca, so that's what birds have as well, you know, where everything comes out, the poop, the pee, his cloaca is right here, where my hand is. So that is the length of his tail. It's pretty short. So almost always it's no more than a fifth of the length of a snake's body is tail. A lot of people also think that they are full of jelly or no bones. I promise you that he is full of lots of bones and no jelly whatsoever. And they have many, many, many vertebrae, so many, many bones in their back, and many, many ribs. because their body is really, really, really long. Now, that being said, they are really fragile. So snakes have been known to unfortunately pass away if dropped. They have really, really specialized muscles to help them slither and move. And if they are dropped, they could really hurt those muscles, and they can also break all of those bones that they have. But it is a myth that these guys are mostly tail. They're actually mostly back and ribs, and only a little bit tail. There you go, bud, have fun. Another myth is that snakes cannot hear because they don't have ears. That is not true. So these guys, it is true that they don't have ears. It's not true that they can't hear, technically. So these guys have inner ear bones, just like we do. So I think I've talked about before, the cartilage that surrounds our ears is not really all that important. It doesn't really do much. Makes my ears look nice and pretty with all my earrings, but aside from that, it doesn't really amplify noise all that much. All of the important stuff is inside our head. So he does have some of those important bones in his ear, and what that helps him do is to feel and hear through vibrations in the ground. So some research has been conducted with different species of snake and higher pitches, and it seems thus far that snakes are not as susceptible to really, really high pitches, but really, really loud, low noises they can pick up through those inner ear bones and through their body. And they can hear those vibrations through there. The last myth we're going to talk about before we go to questions is about milk snakes that we talked about before, right? So we mentioned that a milk snake is a type of snake that can be found in Pennsylvania, and it is also in the group of king snakes. A common myth about those guys is that they're called milk snakes because they drink milk. That is not the case. Milk snakes are called milk snakes because they're often found in farms near cows, but they do not drink milk from the udders of cows on your farms, I promise. They're just there because oftentimes in farms there are small rodents, and milk snakes like to eat small rodents. So similar to that would be corn snakes. Corn snakes are not called corn snakes because they eat corn. They're called corn snakes because they are often found in cornfields, again, where mice and other small rodents tend to be because they like to eat that sweet corn. They're also colored in a way that looks like multicolored corn kernels, another reason why they're called corn snakes. So, as we're watching Holmes in all of his beautiful glory, I think we're going to start answering some of your questions. Looks like Liam and Ronan would like to know if Arizona king snakes bite and if they hiss. Wonderful question, Liam and Ronan. So, not something that I am proud of. I have been bitten by 2 snakes before, and Holmes was one of them. It wasn't his fault. I was going into his enclosure, and my hand was placed in a precarious way for too long of a period of time, and he did happen to give me a little bit of a nip. It was a very, very small bite. So yes, he has bitten one person one time, and that person was me. Luckily, I learned from that lesson, and I never placed my hand in that location for that extended period of time again. But other than that, he has not bitten anyone else, but they can bite, so he does have teeth. Just because he is not venomous doesn't mean he doesn't have teeth, so it is possible for him to bite. I have never heard him hiss, but it is possible for them to hiss. Way back in the beginning of zoo school, the only snake in our education ambassador collection that I've actually heard hiss was Hoggle, the hognose snake. Zachary would like to know what Holmes' favorite food is. Really good question, Zachary. We do not go feeding Holmes venomous snakes because that is dangerous for him and for us. He really, really enjoys mice. Mice are his favorite. Occasionally he'll get a very small rat, but he really, really enjoys mice. He gets fed once a week, and he gets fed about 30 grams once a week. Gavin would like to know how often he sheds. Really good question, Gavin. Luckily for us, Holmes is a really, really good shedder. So what I mean by that is when he sheds, everything comes off in one foul swoop, and all of the pieces that should come off come off. So what I mean by that is these guys also, along with not having any ears, they don't have eyelids. So they shed the scales over their eyes as well. So when he sheds, everything comes off. And luckily we haven't had any problems with any scales being stuck onto his eyes, and he'll shed about once a month. Owen and Tyler would like to know if he has any family members at the zoo. Good question, Owen and Tyler. He does not. These guys are a solitary species, so he doesn't have any friends either. He also doesn't have any family members living at the zoo, but he has lots of reptile neighbors that he can view around his building that he lives in. Zachary would like to know if he gets enrichment. Yes! So the best thing for us to enrich our reptiles with, because it's a little bit difficult, they're not like a bunny that would play with balls, they're not like Sally the cockatoo that would play with keys, but these guys have a super, super sensitive sense of smell, right? They smell with their tongues, so we'll often give these guys scent enrichment. So we'll take a scent and wipe it on some of their rocks or their hides or their toys, and let them navigate those different smells. We have to be careful with the amount that we use. We often use herbs, so things like rosemary and thyme, and we'll sprinkle some herbs on a wet paper towel and rub that paper towel together, and then wipe that on the toy so it's not super strong. We do the same thing with perfume. Perfume is really, really strong, so we'll put the tiniest dab on our finger and then wipe that around a toy, because their sense of smell is far greater than ours. The other thing that Holmes really, really likes, which also makes our job a lot easier, is he does something called self-soaking. So that means he puts himself in his water bowl and soaks. He loves the water. He loves warm baths. That's probably his favorite thing in his enclosure. And for those reptiles that aren't as good at soaking themselves, we have to place in warm baths and make them take their baths, whereas Holmes is really good at taking his baths by himself. Sophia would like to know if he can drop his tail. Sophia, you've been watching Zoo School. So no, he can't drop his tail like Sydney, the blue-tongued skink, or our bearded dragons. So if he were to lose part of his tail, it's possible that he could survive depending on how bad the damage is or was, but it would not grow back. Really good question. All right, guys, it looks like we have time for 3 more questions. It looks like Maria would like to know if you can have one as a pet. Maria, very good question. So I've read, I haven't looked too much into it, but I've read that aside from ball pythons and boa constrictors, Kingsnake species are the second most common type of snake to have as pets. So yes, you can have these guys as pets. And of course, with me saying you can have these guys as pets, I have to tell you always to do your research before getting any pet. Snakes are relatively easy to take care of in the fact that they don't need constant attention or enrichment, and they're pretty easy to clean. However, they need the appropriate space and enclosure. Their enclosures are not cheap. Reptile enclosures tend to be pretty expensive, and he's a bigger snake, so he needs lots of room. And the other expensive and important part for reptiles, if you have them or are thinking about getting them as pets, is the heat and light situation. So heat bulbs and light bulbs and other types of heating devices are also not cheap and need to be replaced, and you need to have the right warmth for the right type of reptile. Sydney would like to know if these guys can find food easily. So yes, yep, they're very, very good at finding food. You can see before he was digging and kind of making his own tunnels. So these guys are very adaptable to their environments. They will go and dig burrows to find little mice underground. They don't often climb trees, but they can climb, you know, over certain types of rocks and whatnot. And they are not picky about their food in the wild. So they will eat anything that they can, you know, grab their little teeth on. I think this is the last question for right now, guys. So how much does he weigh? Really good question. So he weighs about 990 grams, which is just over 2 pounds. So he's a pretty light guy. All right, guys, that looks like that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Again, just a reminder, the Great Foundation Quest for the Best is going to match any donations that are given to the zoo in the month of May up to $25,000. So if you're willing and able to help support the zoo, we would greatly appreciate it. Thank you guys so much. Have a great rest of your day, and we hope to see you guys tomorrow.